The county truck door slammed, and a man in a neon vest stepped out holding a tablet instead of a clipboard. He did not look at me first. He looked at the bridge. Or what was left of it. The broken span hung low over the creek, one side already sinking into the water. He walked straight past Victoria without greeting her. That was new. She noticed it too. Her smile tightened just a little. The hum of engines across the creek grew louder. Drivers were getting impatient. A horn blared. Then another. The sound echoed off the hillside like pressure building. The inspector crouched near the cut beam. He ran his hand along the edge. Fresh steel. Clean cut. Not structural failure. Not decay. Deliberate removal. He stood up slow and looked at Victoria. "Who authorized full span removal?" he asked. Her voice stayed smooth. "Emergency compliance under HOA authority." She said it like she had rehearsed it. The man did not nod. He tapped his screen instead. One of the workers shifted his weight. Another turned off the generator. Silence crept in again, broken only by the creak and distant engines. That silence felt heavier now. I stepped closer to the gate control box beside my fence post. The green light blinked steady. The keypad still worked. They had not touched it. Not even scratched it. That told me everything. Victoria followed my movement with her eyes. "Do not interfere," she said, softer now. I did not answer. I just rested my hand on the metal casing. It was warm from the morning sun. Under that panel sat the relay system that controlled entry. Not just a gate. Access authorization. Timed entry logs. Emergency override routing. Everything flowed through this point. Every resident. Every delivery. Every service vehicle. I had maintained it for years. Quietly. Reliably. Nobody paid attention when things worked. Across the creek, a man in a suit climbed out of his car and started walking toward the waterline. He stopped when he saw the gap. His face changed. He pulled out his phone. Another horn sounded. Longer this time. The inspector walked over to me. "You own this access?" he asked. I nodded once. Victoria stepped in fast. "He owns a portion," she corrected. "The community retains usage rights." The inspector did not look at her. "Do you have documentation on site?" he asked me. I could feel Victoria watching my hands. Waiting. Measuring. I reached into my jacket slowly and pulled out a folded copy of the access agreement. The edges were worn. The signature line was clear. My father's name. The inspector scanned it. His brow shifted just enough to matter. He zoomed in on a clause. Then he read it again. Victoria leaned closer, trying to see the screen. He angled it away. That was the second crack. A woman across the creek shouted that her child needed to get to school. A delivery truck tried to turn around and nearly clipped a mailbox. The line of vehicles stretched farther now. This was spreading. Not just inconvenience. System failure. The inspector straightened and looked at the broken bridge again. Then he looked at the control box. Then back at me. "Is there any alternate access route?" he asked. I shook my head. No detour. No secondary road. Just this. Victoria exhaled slowly, like she was recalculating in real time. "We will arrange temporary solutions," she said. But she did not sound certain anymore. The inspector did not respond. He tapped his tablet again, then paused. His finger hovered over the screen. He glanced at the clause one more time. Something in that document had changed the direction of this morning. He looked at me, then at the growing line of trapped cars, then back at the broken span. And then he made a call I could not hear. The inspector turned slightly away as he spoke into his phone, his voice low, controlled, but the words, full access dependency, carried just enough across the quiet. Victoria heard it too. Her shoulders stiffened. She stepped closer, heels crunching on gravel, trying to reclaim the space like it still belonged to her. "This is being handled," she said, sharper now. The inspector did not answer her. He listened instead, eyes fixed on the broken span, then on the line of cars stretching deeper into the neighborhood. A black SUV tried to reverse. It bumped a curb. Someone shouted again. That sound was different. Not frustration. Concern. I stayed where I was, hands still. Resting on the control box. The metal had warmed more under the rising sun. The green light blinked steady. System active. System waiting. Victoria noticed that light. Her gaze dropped to the keypad. Just for a second. Then she looked back at me. "You need to cooperate," she said, lower now, almost urgent. That was new. 8 months of pressure, and this was the first time she sounded unsure. I did not move. The inspector ended the call and walked back toward us. His pace was slower now. Measured. He tapped his tablet again, then turned the screen toward Victoria. "The removal of this span has triggered a restricted access condition," he said. Each word landed clean. No emotion. Just fact. Victoria blinked once. "We have authority over community infrastructure," she replied. But her voice had lost that smooth edge. The inspector shook his head slightly. "Not this infrastructure," he said. He pointed at the document still in his hand. "Access easement is conditional. It requires operational continuity." He did not explain further. He did not need to. The meaning sat there in the air between us. The broken bridge. The silent gate system. The line of trapped residents. A system built to flow, now cut in the middle. Across the creek, a man in a blue shirt started waving his arms. "I have a contractor coming in," he yelled. "How are they supposed to get through?" Nobody answered him. Another car engine shut off. Then another. The hum faded into a tense stillness. Even the birds seemed to pull back from the noise. Victoria crossed her arms. It looked controlled, but her fingers tapped against her sleeve. Small movement. Fast rhythm. "We can install a temporary crossing," she said. "We will coordinate with the county." The inspector did not look convinced. "That requires permits," he said. "And time." He glanced at the creek, then at the broken supports. "You do not have either right now." That landed harder than anything else so far. Time. That was the pressure point. I watched Victoria process it. Her eyes flicked toward the residents. Toward the growing line. Toward the cameras still recording behind her SUV. This was not the outcome she had staged. Not even close. I shifted my hand slightly on the control box. The relay inside clicked once. Soft. Almost nothing. But she heard it. Her head turned fast. "What did you just do?" she asked. I looked at the keypad. Then back at her. "Nothing yet," I said. The inspector watched both of us now. He was no longer just observing the bridge. He was watching the system around it. Watching control shift. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the smell of cut steel and creek water. The morning felt different. Heavier. Charged. Victoria took a step closer to me. Close enough that I could see the strain in her eyes. "We can resolve this," she said quietly. "There is no need to escalate." But she was already escalating. She just did not realize how far this had moved beyond her. The inspector lifted his radio. Paused. Looked at the bridge again. Then at the gate system. Then at me. And he hesitated. The inspector lowered his radio but did not press the button, and that pause stretched longer than it should have. Victoria saw it. Her control slipped just a fraction more. "You are overcomplicating this," she said, voice tighter now. "We will reopen access within 48 hours. The inspector glanced at the broken span, then at the creek pushing under it, then at the idle line of cars baking in the sun. "You do not have 48 hours, he said. A child started crying across the creek. Someone slammed a car door. The sound echoed sharp and hollow. Pressure was building from every direction now. I lifted the metal cover of the control box just enough to expose the keypad wiring beneath. The faint hum of current grew clearer. The relay clicked again. Victoria took a step back this time. Not much. Just enough to notice. "Do not touch that," she said quickly. That word came out fast. Not polished. Not rehearsed. Real. I kept my hand steady. "This system logs every entry," I said. "Every vehicle. Every service call. Every override." I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The inspector leaned in slightly, listening. Victoria shook her head. "That is irrelevant," she said, but her eyes stayed locked on the open panel. She knew it was not irrelevant. She just did not want him to. Hear why. Across the creek, a delivery driver climbed out of his truck and walked closer, squinting at the gap. "You cannot shut this down," he called. "I have a schedule." Nobody answered him. Nobody could. The system was already shut down. They just had not accepted it yet. The inspector stepped closer to the control box. "Is this tied to access authorization?" he asked. I nodded once. "Primary and emergency routing," I said. "Without it, nothing moves legally in or out." That word hung there. Legally. Victoria inhaled slow, then forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. "We can authorize temporary access manually," she said. "We have procedures." The inspector looked at her for a long second. Then he looked back at me. "Can they?" he asked quietly. I closed the panel halfway, leaving the wiring still visible. "Not without triggering a violation," I said. The inspector's jaw shifted. Another small change, but it mattered. He understood now. Not just the bridge. The system behind it. The dependency. The control point. Victoria crossed her arms again, but this time it looked defensive, not confident. "You are creating a problem that does not need to exist," she said. Her tone sharpened again, but it sounded thinner. I shook my head slightly. "The problem already exists," I said. "You just cut through it." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of warm asphalt and creek water. A paper flyer from one of the parked cars lifted and slid across the gravel. The line of vehicles had grown longer. People were stepping out now, gathering near the edge, pointing, talking louder. The cameras behind Victoria were still rolling. Capturing everything. She glanced back at them, then quickly forward again. Optics mattered to her. They always had. "We will handle this internally," she said. "There is no need for county escalation." The inspector finally lifted his radio again. This time his thumb rested on the button. He did not press it yet. He looked at the broken span one more time. Then at the control box. Then at the crowd forming across the creek. Then back at Victoria. "This is already beyond internal," he said. That sentence landed harder than any warning so far. Victoria's expression froze for a second. Just a second. Then it cracked. "You do not understand the agreements in place," she said, faster now. "This community has protections." I let the panel fall back into place with a soft metallic click. The green light blinked again. Steady. Unchanged. So do I said. The inspector watched me, then looked down at his tablet again. He scrolled. Stopped. Zoomed in. The clause was still there. The same one. He read it one more time. And then his thumb moved. The radio clicked, sharp and final, and the inspector spoke into it with a calm voice that cut through everything else. I need county oversight on a restricted access violation. Full dependency route compromised. That word spread faster than the dust in the air. Oversight. Victoria's head snapped toward him. That is not necessary, she said quickly. Too quickly. The inspector did not look at her. He kept talking into the radio, listing coordinates, describing the broken span, the blocked entry, the volume of residents affected. Each detail made this bigger. More official. Less controllable. Across the creek, the crowd grew thicker. People were no longer waiting in their cars. They were gathering near the edge, phones out, recording. A man in a polo shirt shouted something about property access rights. Another woman asked about emergency services. That question hung heavier than the rest. Emergency services. The inspector heard it. He ended the call and looked at Victoria again. Can fire or medical units reach the interior? He asked. She hesitated. Just a second. But it was enough. We will coordinate temporary entry, she said. It sounded rehearsed again, but weaker now. The inspector nodded slowly, like he was confirming something he already suspected. I stayed beside the control box, watching the green light blink. The system had not changed. The rules had not changed. Only their understanding of it had. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the secondary key. Smaller. Worn smooth at the edges. My father used to carry it on a separate ring. Said it was for when things stopped working the normal way. I held it up, just enough for the inspector to see. Manual. Override, he asked. I shook my head. Not exactly, I said. Victoria's eyes locked onto the key. She stepped forward again, slower this time, more careful. You are not authorized to alter access, she said. The words were firm, but the certainty was gone. I slid the key into the lower panel lock. It turned with a soft click. The hum inside the box shifted slightly. Not louder. Just different. The inspector leaned closer. He was paying full attention now. What does that do? He asked. I did not answer right away. I let the moment sit. The crowd noise across the creek filled the gap. Engines idling. Voices overlapping. A distant siren somewhere far off. Then I spoke. It enforces the original access conditions, I said. The inspector's eyes flicked back to the document on his tablet. He connected it fast. Victoria did not. Not yet. Stop, she said, sharper now. You are escalating this unnecessarily. I turned the key one more notch. Another relay clicked. The green light on the panel flickered once, then steadied again. But something had changed. The inspector saw it in the system log on his screen. His expression shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. Conditional access lock, he said under his breath. Victoria froze. That phrase hit her. Hard. She looked at the bridge. Then at the crowd. Then back at the control box. The realization started to land. You cannot restrict entry, she said, but it sounded like a question now. I met her eyes. I did not restrict it, I said. You did. The wind carried a new sound from the far side. A second siren. Closer this time. The inspector stepped back and raised his radio again. He did not hesitate now. Advise emergency units to stage at perimeter, he said. No interior access available. That sentence cut through everything. Across the creek, people started turning, looking for the source of the siren. Looking for answers. Victoria's composure cracked completely for the first time. "This will cost you," she said, voice low, tight. I closed the panel gently and pulled the key free. The metal was warm in my hand. "It already costs them," I said, nodding toward the trapped line of homes. The inspector watched me for a long second. Then he looked at the system log again. Something in that screen made him go still. Completely still. The inspector did not move for a full 3 seconds, his eyes locked on the system log like he had just found something that should not exist. Then he tilted the screen slightly, shielding it from Victoria, and scrolled back. "This log goes back how far?" he asked. His voice had changed. Lower. Focused. I watched the numbers flick past in the reflection. "Every entry for the last 15 years, I said. That made him stop again. 15 years meant history. Not just access. Patterns. Decisions. Victoria stepped in closer, trying to see. "That is private system data," she said quickly. "You cannot access that without board approval." The inspector did not look at her. "It is tied to a county-registered easement," he said. "It is not private." That landed hard. The crowd across the creek had gone louder now. More people. More voices. Someone shouted that their security system could not sync. Another complained about deliveries stuck outside. The ripple effect was spreading faster than the physical damage. I could feel it in the air. The system was not just about a road. It was about everything connected to that road. The inspector zoomed in on a section of the log. His brow tightened. "You have been flagging restricted access warnings for months," he said. He was not asking. He was stating. Victoria froze. Just for a second. Then she recovered. "Routine maintenance alerts," she said. But it came out thin. The inspector shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "These are escalation warnings tied to load capacity and compliance thresholds." He turned the screen just enough for me to see. Red markers. Repeated. Ignored. I recognized the timestamps. Dates when traffic exceeded design limits. Dates when temporary permits were pushed through. Dates when requests came in to expand access without reinforcement. They had been stretching the system. Quietly. Consistently. Victoria folded her arms again, tighter now. "We have engineers who reviewed this," she said. The bridge was outdated. The inspector looked up at her finally. "Outdated does not mean unauthorized removal," he said. That word again. Unauthorized. It hung there like a weight. A second county vehicle pulled up behind the first. Another official stepped out, carrying a thicker folder. No tablet this time. Paper. That meant escalation. That meant record. Victoria saw it and turned slightly, trying to intercept him before he reached us. "We are handling this internally," she said, stepping into his path. He did not stop. He walked around her without breaking stride. That was the third crack. The new official nodded at the inspector, then looked at the bridge, then at the control box. "Is this the only access point?" he asked. The inspector nodded once. "Primary and exclusive," he said. The man exhaled slowly. "Then this is now a compliance incident," he said. That phrase shifted the ground again. Across the creek, a resident raised his voice louder than the rest. "So we are just stuck here," he shouted. Nobody answered him directly. But the answer was already clear. I rested my hand back on the control box. The hum felt steady. Reliable. It had always been reliable. That was the part they never valued. Victoria turned back toward me, her expression no longer controlled. "You knew this would happen," she said. It was not an accusation. It was realization. I held her gaze. "I warned you," I said. The inspector glanced between us, then back to the log. He tapped a specific entry. "What is this?" he asked. I leaned in slightly. It was dated 3 weeks ago. A request for temporary load increase. Denied. Marked critical. Victoria's signature sat at the bottom. The inspector looked at her. This time, she had no immediate response. The wind shifted again, carrying the sound of the sirens now closer, but still stopping short of the creek. They could not cross. They would not cross. The system held. The inspector straightened slowly, closing the tablet just enough to mark his place. Then he looked at the new official. "We need to secure this access point," he said. The second man nodded once. "Agreed." Victoria stepped forward again, voice rising now. "You cannot lock down a private community," she said. The inspector met her eyes. Calm. Certain. "It is. Not private when it fails public access compliance," he said. That was the moment everything shifted fully. Not just control. Authority. Victoria's hands clenched at her sides. She looked at the bridge. Then at the crowd. Then back at me. And for the first time, she did not look like she had a move left. The second official opened his folder and pulled out a bright orange notice. The paper caught the sunlight. Impossible to miss. He held it in place for a second before speaking. And then he started reading. The official's voice cut clean through the noise as he began reading from the orange notice, each word deliberate, each line heavier than the last. Immediate compliance violation. Unauthorized removal of critical access infrastructure. Restricted entry condition in effect until further review. The crowd across the creek went quiet in waves, like the sound had knocked the air out of them. A man lowered his phone slowly. Someone else stepped back from the edge. The weight of it was settling in. Not inconvenience. Not delay. Shut down. Victoria shook her head once, sharp. "This is excessive," she said. "We are already resolving the issue." The official did not stop reading. He turned a page. "All inbound and outbound access is suspended pending structural and legal review. Emergency services to stage at perimeter only." That line hit harder than anything before it. You could feel it ripple through the people on the other side. A woman covered her mouth. A man turned away and started pacing. Engines began shutting off one by one. Silence replaced the hum. Victoria stepped forward, voice rising. "You cannot isolate an entire community over a single structure," she said. The inspector finally looked directly at her. "It is not a single structure," he said. "It is the only one." That distinction landed like a door closing. Victoria's composure slipped again. "We have rights," she said. "There are agreements." The inspector held up the tablet slightly. "And those agreements require continuous access," he said. "Which no longer exists." I stayed where I was, the control box steady at my side, the green light blinking like nothing had changed. But everything had. The second official finished reading and handed the notice to Victoria. She did not take it at first. She just stared at it. The bright orange paper reflected in her eyes. Then she grabbed it, fast, like she could still control something if she moved quickly enough. "This will be challenged," she said. "Immediately." The inspector nodded once. "That is your right," he said. "But until then, this stands." Across the creek, a resident raised his voice again. "What about our homes?" he shouted. "What about access?" No one answered him directly, but all eyes turned back toward us. Toward the bridge. Toward the system. Toward the one point that controlled everything. Victoria followed their gaze. She saw it now the way they did. Not as a structure. Not as a dispute. As a bottleneck. As leverage. She turned back to me, slower this time, more measured. "You can fix this," she said quietly. The tone had changed again. Not authority. Not demand. Something closer to negotiation. I looked past her at the broken span, then at the line of homes beyond it, quiet now, waiting. "It was already fixed," I said. The inspector watched both of us closely. He was not interrupting anymore. He was letting it unfold. Victoria tightened her grip on the notice. "Then fix it again," she said. The words came out softer, but heavier. I shook my head once. "Not like before," I said. A breeze pushed through, carrying the scent of warm metal and still water. The cameras were still rolling behind her. The crowd was still watching. This was no longer contained. It had crossed into something bigger. The second official stepped back, scanning the area, marking positions, taking notes. Procedure had taken over. Victoria looked at him, then back at me, calculating again, searching for something she could still control. But the system was not hers anymore. Not today. Not after this. I reached up and tapped the side of the control box lightly. The sound echoed faint against the metal. "This is the access point," I said. "Everything flows through here." The inspector nodded slightly. He already understood. Victoria did too now. And that was the real shift. Not the bridge. Not the notice. The understanding. She stepped closer, lowering her voice further. "Tell me what you want," she said. The words barely carried past us. But they changed everything. I looked at her for a long second. Then I glanced at the inspector. Then back at the crowd waiting across the creek. And I did not answer right away. Victoria's words hung in the air, thin but heavy, and for the first time she was not issuing orders, she was asking. I let the silence stretch. The creek moved under the broken span. The wind carried the faint echo of distant sirens waiting at the perimeter. Everything had slowed down, but nothing had stopped. I looked at the control box, then back at her. "Access is not free anymore," I said. My voice stayed calm. Steady. The inspector shifted slightly, listening closer. Victoria blinked once, like she needed a second to process that sentence. "We already pay for maintenance," she replied, trying to recover ground. I shook my head. "You paid for convenience," I said. "You never paid for control." That word landed. Control. It always came back to that. Across the creek, someone called out asking how long this would take. No one answered. The waiting had turned into pressure. The second official was still writing notes, documenting everything. This was now part of record. Victoria glanced at him, then back at me. She understood what that meant. This was no longer a private disagreement. It was a documented failure. "Tell me the terms," she said, quieter now. No sharp edges left. I rested my hand against the control box again. The metal was warm. Familiar. "Full restoration of access requires structural compliance," I said. "Bridge rebuilt to original specifications. Inspected. Approved." The inspector nodded slightly. That part was expected. Victoria nodded too, fast, like she could accept that easily. "We can arrange that," she said. But I was not finished. I let a few seconds pass. The crowd noise shifted again. People were watching us now. Waiting for something to change. "And access rights change," I added. That stopped her. Completely. "What do you mean?" she asked. I met her eyes. Usage becomes conditional, I said. Metered entry. Recorded. Enforced through this system. I tapped the control box lightly. The sound echoed again. Final. Victoria stared at the panel like she was seeing it for the first time. Not as infrastructure. As leverage. You want to charge access, she said. Not disbelief. Realization. I did not answer directly. I just held her gaze. The inspector looked between us, then back at the system log. He understood the implication. This was not just repair. This was restructuring control. Across the creek, a man stepped forward and shouted, "What is happening over there?" The tension in his voice cut through everything. The second official paused his writing and looked up. Even he was waiting now. Victoria exhaled slowly, longer this time. She looked at the broken span again. Then at the line of homes behind it. Then back at me. "That will never pass with the board," she said. Her voice was softer, but it carried weight. I shrugged slightly. "Then nothing passes," I said. The wind shifted again. The smell of heated metal and creek water mixed in the air. The inspector closed his tablet halfway, like he was marking a point of decision. "Current condition cannot be lifted without compliance," he said. "And compliance requires functional access." He did not say more. He did not need to. The equation was clear now. Victoria pressed her lips together. Thinking. Calculating. The cameras behind her were still recording. The residents were still watching. The county was now involved. Every option she had left carried consequences. "If I agree," she said slowly, "this becomes permanent." I nodded once. No hesitation. That was the point. That was always the point. She looked down at the orange notice still in her hand. Then back at me. Then at the inspector. Then at the crowd waiting across the creek. She was running out of space. Running out of time. Running out of control. The second official stepped closer, waiting for direction. The inspector waited too. Everyone was waiting now. For her. For me. For the system to move again. Victoria took one slow breath. Then another. And then she spoke. Victoria's lips parted, but no words came out at first. The silence stretched across the creek, across the line of stalled cars, across the broken span hanging over the water. Then she swallowed and nodded once. Small. Controlled. "We will agree to the terms," she said. The sentence sounded heavy, like it cost her more than anything she had said all morning. The inspector did not react right away. He watched her for a second longer, making sure she understood what she had just committed to. The second official stopped writing and looked up. The crowd across the creek leaned in without realizing it. I did not move. I just held her gaze. "In writing," I said. She nodded again, quicker this time. "In writing," she repeated. The inspector turned slightly and gestured to the second official. The orange notice was folded once, then tucked into the folder. A new document came out. Clean. Blank. Formal. The sound of paper shifting in the breeze felt louder than it should have. Victoria took a pen from her pocket. Her hand was steady now, but slower than before. She signed. The second official added his signature. Then the inspector. The system had shifted from argument to record. From control to agreement. I reached for the control box again and slid the small key back into the lower panel. The metal clicked softly. Familiar. The relay inside responded with a low hum. Not loud. Just enough to feel. The inspector watched the panel closely. Victoria did too. Everyone did. I turned the key one notch back. The green light flickered once. Then again. Then it steadied. Across the creek, nothing moved yet. The bridge was still broken. The gap was still there. But something else had changed. Authorization. The inspector glanced at his tablet. The log updated in real time. Conditional access shift recorded. He nodded once, almost to himself. Temporary staging access can be coordinated now, he said. The second official picked up his radio and began relaying new instructions. The distant sirens adjusted. Not retreating. Repositioning. Across the creek, a few engines turned back on. Cautious. Uncertain. Victoria exhaled slowly, like she had been holding her breath all morning. She looked at the control box again, then at me. There was no anger left in her expression. Just understanding. And something else. Respect, maybe. Or acceptance. You planned this, she said quietly. I shook my head. I prepared for it, I said. The difference mattered. The wind moved through the trees again, softer now. The smell of dust and metal began to fade under the warmth of the day. The broken span still hung there, a reminder of what had started this. But the system behind it was no longer invisible. Not to her. Not to anyone watching. The inspector closed his tablet fully this time. Reconstruction will need to begin immediately, he said. Victoria nodded. No argument. No hesitation. That part was no longer negotiable. The second official finished his call and stepped back, scanning the area one more time. Procedure complete. For now. I pulled the key free and closed the panel. The green light blinked steady again. Same as before. But everything behind it had changed. Victoria held the signed document in her hand, looking at it like it weighed more than paper should. Then she folded it once and slipped it into her folder. Careful. Precise. Final. Across the creek, people were already turning back to their cars, talking, calling, reacting. The ripple was moving again. This time in a different direction. I stepped back from the control box and looked at the broken bridge one more time. Then at the road beyond it. Then at the line of homes that now depended on something they could not see before. Victoria followed my gaze. She did not speak again. She did not need to. The inspector gave a short nod and turned toward his truck. The second official followed. The morning had shifted from conflict to consequence. From assumption to structure. I slid the key back into my pocket. The metal was still warm. And this time, it felt different.